the dial, turn it loud. Miami's pride, make us proud. CanesWear crew, you hear the crowd. Hurricanes ain't backing down. Every play, every score, raising bets and raising roar. Rocking orange, green galore. All for one and one for four. We got FTSN, taking names, win it again. Podcast fam, till the end. Tune in, now let's begin.
What is going on, Canes fans? I am your host, Brad Tejeda. As y'all know, this is the CanesWear daily podcast only on FTSN. Make sure y'all hit that like and subscribe button. We've been having great content all week. And as y'all know, this is Florida State rivalry week. We got a big weekend ahead against our Florida State Seminoles. But as y'all can see, we got a special guest for today's episode. I figured there's a lot of history being made this year for this Miami Hurricanes team. We're currently 7-0. We got a Heisman candidate, maybe Heisman front runner at that, and Cam Ward at quarterback. Number one offense in the country. When you look at the trajectory of where this team is going, very similar to that national championship LSU team with Joe Burrow and company. But if we're going to be talking about stats, records, breaking history, we got to go with the Miami Encyclopedia himself, Mr. Steve Kim. Steve, what's going on, brother?
Brad, great to join you, and congratulations. You've been doing a great job on this new gig and platform. Hope you take this to great places. I know you're going to do some wonderful things, and it's a special year. It truly is a roller coaster. It's had its ups, it's had its downs, but none of us fell off, and I'm just very excited to join you.
Man, and any Kane fans that don't know who Steve Kim is, please make sure you hit that follow on Twitter, social media, and he's also got a great podcast with Mario Lopez, 3 Knockdown Rules as well, with the boxing that he's doing. Great content. But as much boxing as you know, you probably know just as much, if not more, Miami Hurricanes. Like I mentioned before, you are the human encyclopedia, the president of the Elijah Lofton fan club as well. And Elijah hasn't gotten too much playing time this year, but I think we all have seen little glimpse of any opportunity that young man has gotten. He's definitely taking advantage of it. But before we get into some of these younger guys from Miami that are helping us continue this historic run that we're having this season, talk to me. Let's rewind it a little bit, right? We're 7-0 currently. We're going against Florida State this week. But if we go back at the beginning of the season, right, the Florida-Miami matchup in the Swamp, there were a lot of commotion, a lot of ruckus. This would be the ultimate, first test for Miami, right? This could be the make or break opportunity of where this team and where Cam Ward, where people really thought Cam Ward was going to be as a quarterback, right? I don't think most people thought the way Cam Ward was throwing the football and what he was doing for this offense and this program, not many people thought this was going to happen before the year, right? But you have not only seen and witnessed some of the great Miami Hurricane players and experienced some of the best football games Miami's had, but right off the bat, Florida matchup, we get the dub in the Swamp. Then you go against South Florida and Virginia Tech, which you were at, along with the Cal game. Talk about this historic run and some of just the glimpses and highlights that you personally have seen with your own eyes, whether it's on TV or in a person in the game. Give me some matchups, some players, just key things that really brought you back to the magical years and runs that Miami's had in the great history of this football program.
Yeah, Brad, going into that Florida game during the offseason on various shows that I did, I also do guest appearances Tuesdays and Thursdays with Coach JB of Last Chance U fame. And, we talk about Miami football literally every appearance that I'm on. And in other guest spots that I did, Brad, I told people this Florida game was the most important of Mario's coaching career. And I want to put that in the context. I thought this season is the most important he's ever going to have at Miami. And that doesn't mean national championship or bust. It means that if he has the type of year that I thought they could have, the next dozen years are set from a recruiting standpoint and all about optics and momentum, because that's what this is in college football nowadays. You have to be able to attract young kids and be able to pluck guys out of the portal and show them you come here, you're going to win, you're going to be developed, and you're going to have some fun. And the Florida game, to me, could not have gone better. And I looked at the season in a couple of ways. Cam Ward was probably the most naturally gifted quarterback for this level or highly acclaimed since Ken Dorsey, even though we've had some decent ones, pretty good ones. Cam's probably the most multi-dimensional guy we've had in the modern day spread era. Second of all, and I've made this point before, Brad, as I looked at all the magazines, the traditional ones like Athlons and Lindy's, and some of the newer ones that are analytically based, like Pick Six Previews and some other sites, if you looked at those magazines back in the summer, we had about 7 or 8 players listed among the top 100. You look at the all ACC preseason rankings, you look at the unit rankings, we were top 10 in every single room except the defensive back, which we can get into. And I kept saying to myself, well, why are we rated 19th? Because right there, all of those things suggest that's a top 10 team.
Yeah.
It was a referendum on Mario Cristobal. Let's be honest. And I tell you where I thought we were underrated. If you look at us from a metrics-based standpoint, which doesn't tell the whole story, but it tells a lot. Last year, Miami was top 30 to 35 on both sides of the ball. That generally means you're a 9 or 10 win team. And we all know why we weren't last year. Certain things happen. We got the yips at one position that's pretty important. So I kept saying to myself, we're actually underrated as a preseason team. I'm not really all that surprised that we're 7-0. I actually think we need to be a little bit better in certain aspects of the game. And I'll just wrap this up right here. If you look at the Miami record book, Bernie Kosar still has the most amount of single season passing yards. That's back in 1984. Brad, you know how hard it is to keep a passing record for 40 years in this modern day era of spread, air raid football? And thankfully, Cam Ward is on pace to shatter that mark.
And that just goes to show you the lack of potency and the it factor quarterbacks that Miami's had in that span since, right? We just haven't had those guys, unfortunately, like other programs. And to your point, you brought up the magazines and looking at, some of the categories of the pre-rankings of Miami when you look at the position groups. And I agree with you. It's not very surprising that we're 7-0 or we were underrated going into the season. But turning a point into this question that I want to ask you, now being 7-0, now going up against a Florida State Seminole rival team that we are a 21-point spread favorite, which I don't think's ever been heard of in this type of rivalry of having that much of a favorite lead going into a game before it starts. But what I want to ask you is this: are you surprised that even currently, before this matchup, you brought up the magazine thing, and obviously now with the way social media, College Game Day is, Pat McAfee, Josh Pate, some of these guys, does it surprise you that in this day and age of college football, you see week in and week out some of the Ole Misses, the Alabamas of the world, the teams in the pretty conference or with the pretty logo that's been around and a little bit more consistent than a Miami program? Does it surprise you that a number 6 ranked undefeated team with a Heisman candidate, number 1 guy in Cam Ward, who's breaking all these records, and it just, when you watch this team on television, it's pretty evident that our offense cannot be messed with, right? But it still seems like, from a media standpoint, from anyone else that's not a Miami Hurricane fan, to this day, we're still underrated because the opponents we played, because we had to play from behind and get out the victories. Why is it that other programs, other big-time programs could go through these same tests that Miami has been able to go through this year? And because Miami's on the winning side of things, which is something we not used to, why is it that Miami still feels like they're underrated or not getting the love and the credit that they deserve, not being moved up in the rankings week in and week out? And to your point, just still feels like Miami's underrated.
Yeah, I mean, Brett, I think it's very simple. When you are on a 20-year skid, the optics don't look good. This has been an underachieving program. Basically, since about 2003 or 4, Miami is essentially a 7-5 program, if you really average it out. So that's a sustained run of mediocrity for a program that has 5 national titles under their belt. And this part, I think, is undeniable. If they had an SEC patch instead of the ACC logo, every close game that you win as a favorite or underdog is a character builder. But every one that you come out of unscathed as an ACC, it's an escape. See, it's all about the framing and the optics of it. Now, I will say this. The Cal game was alarming in a sense that they really did need a miracle. I don't even really listen to the criticisms of the Virginia Tech officiating. I was in that opposite end zone. And when that last play was being reviewed, and look, I kind of know the rule book a little bit. I know this for a fact. When a player touches the ball, and any part of their body is out of bounds, the ball's dead.
Complete.
The
Yep.
ball is dead. It was never about full possession of the ball. People keep talking about it. It's not. Once Isaiah Horton in that 43 jersey had his backside on the white and he had the ball touching him, the game's over. And the ACC actually explained that. And here's the thing that's interesting when you look at the metrics. And again, metrics only tell you so much. The Virginia Tech and Cal game, they significantly out first down both teams. They outgained both teams. They out time of possession both teams. It's one thing to win a game when you don't win those categories. Okay.
Yeah.
When you're actually outgained across the board, and let's say they give you 4 or 5 turnovers, which neither team did. That was more to me a reflection of Miami having to clean up a couple things. Number one, Cam Ward against Virginia Tech, 3 turnovers. That really is unacceptable. And against the Cal game, they gave up 5 plays of 50 yards. Brad, that is very difficult to win football like that. And in fact, Fernando Mendoza, I think, had 11 completions and almost 300 yards. That's not winning football. But thankfully, the offense is truly an elite unit.
Now, you brought up metrics, right? And obviously, some of the best teams each year in football season, if you're going to have these historic runs, become undefeated, be a college football playoff contention, win the ACC championship, some of these metrics and stats have got to change from prior years, right? And I want to bring up one of these metrics that have really been surprising, not only to me, but most Cane fans. And I don't think it gets talked about enough. And it's third down conversion rate on the offensive side of the football. This has been something in particular that has really destroyed Miami Hurricanes football in the last 15, 20 years, not only because you don't have a dynamic quarterback, whether it's the offensive line not being consistent or just the playmakers around the quarterback not being able to put it all together. And of course, we could go on and on about the OC, the game planning scheme, whatnot. But in today's football season, this year with the Miami Hurricanes, we are number 1 in the country on third down conversion at 60%. And not only are we number 1 in the country, but we're doing it in critical moments where it's not necessarily Cam Ward throwing the football all the time. You saw with this last game against Louisville, there were a lot of third down crunch opportunities where Cam Ward only had 7 carries, maybe 25 or 30 rushing yards. But when you go back and you watch those 7 carries, they came in monumental moments and key situations when we really needed that first down. And we didn't necessarily have to rely on a Damian Martinez or Mark Fletcher run, right? Talk to me about that metric in particular, and also bring up maybe 1 or 2 other tricks that leading up to this magical run and season we've had. What has surprised you?
Well, here's the issue, and I said about Cam Ward, he is not Lamar Jackson. Those guys are rare. He's not Michael Vick. What he is a highly skilled passer with mobility. And if you've seen, we don't do a lot of that read option. We're not going to put him at risk because, quite frankly, it's not like we have Don Strock as the backup. Old reference for you Dolphin fans. But the play you're talking about that stands out to me, 3rd and 17. And on that drive where we crossed the 50-point barrier, there was 3rd and 17, and Cam Ward did something that last year's quarterback simply was not capable of doing. He flipped the chains back over. In today's football, Brad, the way I look at it, you need to have a quarterback that if he's not going to be super mobile, 2-3 times a game, he has to have enough athleticism on 3rd and 5 to get you 6 yards with his legs. I think that is so important. In my view, functional mobility out of that quarterback position, it is no longer a luxury. I almost think it's a necessity because Cam did that a few times throughout the game. And that allows you to stack a lot of plays on an opposing defense. And this much is true. When defenses have to play more, they get worse. That is the truth. Fatigue makes cowards of us all, and it really lessens the impact of a defense when they're out on the field more than 70 plays. There's actually been studies done on that. And the one thing about Cam Ward, he's got a great feel. He really does. And I tell you one thing that was interesting. We would not have seen this in past years. Last week, Mario Cristobal went for it on 4th down inside his own 35 twice. That shows me right there the evolution of Mario Cristobal, that there was this perception, whether it's fair or not, or even accurate. He's a ground and pound guy. He's a quarterback killer. He likes to establish the run, and he's intractable in his style. This year, my Twitter handle is Cristobal 2024 because I think he realized what he has, how he can win games, and along with the running game, the one thing I really love to see, we won a lot of tempo, Brad. We didn't go
We did.
full blown Baylor Art Briles, but we used a lot of tempo, and that put Louisville in some spots where we outmanned them on the outside. I'm just telling you, I think Mario's done a brilliant job of evolving as a coach this season.
And the changes in game plans that not only him, but Shannon Dawson and Lance Guidry have made throughout the year as well. I mean, we talked about it early on. Other than the Florida game, Damian Martinez was kind of your 2 yards or less running back ever since Florida matchup until this Louisville game, right? And I think a lot of it had to do, unfortunately, with either playing behind early, in these last 2 games prior to Louisville, where you couldn't really establish the run, or the other thing was you started right out the gate every single game with Damian Martinez as your lead back. And what you saw was when you started to do that 1-2 punch rotation with Martinez and Fletcher, it was Fletcher that really always had the hot hand and really got you those 5 to 10 yards at a bunch, right? And it wasn't Martinez. And once you got to that second, third, fourth quarter, when it was time for Martinez to get back in, either you were playing from behind and couldn't really run the ball, or it was the opposite. You were already blowing teams out. And at that point, it was like, why give Martinez more burn when you could get the Chris Johnson, the Jordan Lyles, the A.J. Allen's more touches as well? But what you saw in this Louisville game was they switched it up, right? They started right out the gate with a Mark Fletcher, because what you saw in the last 2 previous games was Mark Fletcher was the one with the start of the hot hand. And what I liked about the change of rotation was it was Damian Martinez at the end of football games. What benefits and what you see the most in Damian Martinez when you pull up the film is he's a pounder. He's a guy that will drop the shoulder and continue to bring you an extra couple yards. And you need that the most in third and fourth quarters. And I think Mario and this staff knew that if this was going to be a close game, which it was going to be a high scoring game. And you had to make sure in that third and fourth quarter, when you didn't necessarily have to rely on the pass, that running back that you gave that football had a lot of juice in him. And I think that really benefited us this football game. What was your thoughts on the new rotation switch?
Yeah, I mean, Brad, I felt this year play, if you really look at it, I've studied a lot of Bill Walsh, read a lot of books on him. He never believed in establishing the run, by the way. He believed in, I'm going to establish my offense. I'm going to come out with whatever I do in the throw game. And he had a fundamental belief. Let me score points early. Let me get ahead. And the running game is really for tiring out and grinding the clock on fatigue defenses in the last 10 minutes of a game. And now I also need pass rushers because the opposing team is going to be in throw game mode. We actually have all the parts. That's what's disappointing about the secondary is with the amount of points that Cam Ward is producing on that side of the ball and the fact that Reuben Bain is back now. The defensive backfield has to be better because they're going to have opportunities to make plays on the back end. But the running game, I think, has been okay because here's the issue. When you have Cam Ward and that receiving group and the tight end group and an offensive line that could pass pro as well as they do, I actually don't want this team to be run first. I think establishing the run is very overrated. You got to establish points, and now you can manipulate how you want to play in the second half of games. If Miami can get fully healthy defensively, I actually think they're a better team than they've shown. And look, we don't need the 85 Bears. Just be a functional, solid, respectable defense. And I do expect to see some sort of youth movement in the defensive backfield. But Damian Martinez, I think you hit upon something very interesting. He might be better off as the second back. That much is clear. And so in a running back, if you're planning to play 16 to 17 games, knock on wood, if you're truly one of those teams that's going to make a deep playoff run, you're going to need about 3 running backs, if not 4. Yeah. So I never really jumped off the Damian Martinez bandwagon, and I tried to remind people over the summer, if you watch Damian Martinez at Oregon State, he did a lot of stuff underneath center with DJU. That's what Jonathan Smith runs, even at Michigan State now. He is now running out of a shotgun and a pistol. So it is a different style of running, and I still think he might be making that full adjustment.
Now, switching to the defensive side of the ball, Steve, some Cane fans will tell you, hey, we're 7-0. We're winning every game. There's no need to nitpick the defensive side of the ball. We're one of the best teams in the country. let's not really worry too much about it, right? But when I look at this defense, you brought up the injuries, right, and staying healthy. I think we can all agree as Miami Hurricane fans before the season even started. You talked about the position standings for each position group, especially in the magazines, and the only glaring one that wasn't in the top 20 was the secondary, right? And we knew going into this football season, guys were going to have to step up, whether it was Jaden Harris, whether it was Daryl Porter, or Damari Brown making that next step. No one brought up the OJ Romanis Frederics of the world, right? Or someone like Popo taking that next step at the linebacker room. But what I want to ask you is this: when you look at the defense, right, statistically, we're still top 30 defense in the country. But when you look at the last few weeks, especially whether it was Virginia Tech or Cal or now Louisville, these were three programs that all had the firepower on offense, all had playmakers and weapons, to where we knew going into the game that they could test this defense. And to your point, we thankfully, knock on wood, we have not had injuries in the secondary. But so far, what we have seen in the secondary is there's a lot of glaring weaknesses. There's still guys that we were expected to make that next jump that just hasn't gotten together. And now we are in week 8 going against Florida State. And when you look at the remaining schedule, this might benefit Miami. When you look at the remaining schedule, we don't really have another team until we get to the ACC championship, possibly, of the offensive firepower that we've already gone through, right? But I will say this: the time is now, not trying to steal John Ruiz's quote and phrase, right? But the time is now for some of these guys in the secondary, to your point of bringing some younger guys in, because at this point, if some of these younger guys that we've been asking for, whether it was fall, spring, or even week 2, week 3, if they're not playing by week 8, you got to think that they're probably not going to play much the rest of the year. But that also goes to this: the only guys that we're depending on right now aren't doing a very good job. And some of these guys are guys that you were calling on the leaders of this program this year. Is that something that you're worried about going on the rest of the season, especially if we're continuing to play 17 or 18 games?
Brad, the thing that caught my attention about Mario Cristobal's press conference on Monday was 2 things. He said Damari Brown will probably, hopefully, knock on wood, will return by mid to late November. To me, that means playoff run, because I'm going to think positively. And number 2, he said that Zaquan Patterson has earned more playing time, something I've been calling for about 3-4 weeks. I don't know if Washington can make that full transition halfway through the year and be our nickel or slot corner and kick outside, because that Damari Brown injury had a domino effect, because it didn't weaken just one position, it weakened 2, because Daryl Porter's not really a slot corner, and he had some issues. You saw what Sean Atkins had a lot of success during the South Florida game. Look, I've watched a lot of Miami football, and I keep making this point. You don't need Ed Reed, Sean Taylor, Benny Blades, or Darrell Williams to win big-time football games. What you need is solid, serviceable play. I can name you loads of Miami defensive backs that never played in the National Football League, that every game they were reliable and they were fundamentally sound. Off the top of my head, Casey Greer, Terrace Harris, Malcolm X. Pearson, Charles Farms, Hurley Brown, Roland Smith, Don Lettis. So, and I remember those guys. They were surrounded by a lot of guys that were future NFLers, but they always played their role. I'll give you another name. A great book in 2000, Lewis at Piscataway, New Jersey. Got drafted in the 7th round, didn't make the team. I still remember him being a perfect compliment to Ed Reed, because he never made bad plays. See, I have a phrase: if you're not going to be a great player, that's fine. Just don't be a bad player. In other words, make the routine play. There's too many plays, whether it's the run fill or just tackling out in space. We make 12-yard gains into 30-yard gains, and that completely skews a drive. And so, like, a lot of people are giving Lance Guidry some heat. And look, he's the coordinator. He makes the money. You give Lance Guidry better athletes on the back end and a sticky cornerback, which we were not able to get the last couple of cycles with a certain coach that hated recruiting. That's no longer here. You know which one, Brad. We are now feeling the effects. But look, we just need solid, serviceable guys. OJ Frederic has made great strides. He's definitely part of the rotation. If you get Damari Brown back and get him up and running, if Washington can play a role, and then you bring Porter back outside, and then with Zaquan Patterson, in essence, it's almost a new secondary running on the fly.
Yeah, I mean, I think you brought up a lot of good points, and I think there are some, glaring holes on the defensive side of the ball and opportunities that definitely can be surpassed by some of these younger guys if they get the opportunity. But what I want to ask you next is we talked a little bit about the offense, we talked about the defense. Now, one thing that always gets overlooked and doesn't get talked about enough, but you and I both know if you want a championship caliber football team, one of the biggest things that gets overlooked is special teams, right? Whether it's kickoff, punt returns, or the other side of it, kicking, field goals, containing kickoff and punt returns. And we saw this past weekend with Louisville, there was 2 special team plays for Louisville that you brought up the Mario press conference on Monday. And I heard some of these other things going back to those 2 plays in particular that really, got me a little frustrated. And this just goes to show, to your point, it's about getting the right guys in there, because now our coaches are game planning, are getting these young men prepared for these situations. Going back to the Colin Lacey kickoff return, right? Oh. They were prepared for something like that. You talk about the punt, the fake punt of Jeff and Brian Brom on that 4th down. That was something they practiced all week going into that game. And they called a timeout prior to them running that punt one more time and missed assignments, right? So going to the special teams, obviously Andy Borregales has had some great field goals to help us out in some of these wins. But then when you look at the punting, we actually haven't had many punts this season because of how dynamic and great our offense and Cam Ward has been. What's your thoughts on special teams? Because obviously, guys like Chris Johnson and others, you were expecting by week 7, week 8, if you're an undefeated team and you're putting up 40, 50 points a game, you would expect some big plays on special teams, but we have yet to do that. What are some of your, reactions on that?
In terms of pure kicking and punting, we've been good, although it was frustrating that Borregales just was not booting the ball 5 yards out of the end zone. I think the safest way to play special teams is to just consistently get touchbacks and say, there you go, touchback, now drive the length of the field. And what was really backbreaking about when Cullen Lacey housed it, we were up 31-17. So I'm thinking, now we could pin our ears back. This is Miami style of defense. Let Reuben Bain, Tyler Barron, and Barrow and Messador eat, right? And when Lacey had almost right in the first half, and I said, you know what, that guy's dangerous. Let's just take the ball out of his hands. And for some reason, Borregales, his kickoffs were not that deep this particular game. And after we had gone out and taken the halftime, and then we get the opening possession, and we put together about a 7-8 minute drive, Restrepo makes a Restrepo play. I'm thinking we're about to take this game over. I mean, we really were that close to playing our style of downhill football, right? And you could feel the air go out of it, and this being college football, 2 plays later, Mark Fletcher fumbles. And all of a sudden, literally, it's tied up. The fake punt was very frustrating to me. That's where I'm a little critical of the staff in a sense that if you know that possession in a time at that time and place is so critical because neither defense is really playing well, and you yourself have gone for it in your own territory, you have to think that other team values the ball as much as we do. And I'm watching the game at Coach Jason Brown's house with Sean King, the former Buck quarterback. And I said to him after we got that 3rd down stop, I said, Sean, this has to be fake punt alert. It has to be. And when they ran the fake punt, I was probably angry as I was as a fan anytime this year, because that's the one time that your team has to have a football IQ, and everyone outside of either Ray or X, whoever was back there, they have to be talking to them, hey, guys, fake punt's not happening here. And to let it happen, and look what happened, Brad. They tied the game. Those things matter.
Yeah, and I thought what was interesting, too, was I brought this up a little while ago about just from the media perspective of Miami still being undefeated, one of the few undefeated teams left in college football, having the second high strength of schedule out of the undefeated teams left, right behind Oregon, right? But you look at the last 3 games, whether Virginia Tech, Cal, and Louisville, to your point, just like the South Florida game, there was a small moment in time in that game where we trailed South Florida. But as soon as we trailed, we reacted and we coasted from there and we broke out the lead, right? You saw the last 3 games, to your point. There were opportunities in each of those games where we had that possession and it was time for us to take that lead and make it big like the other games, right? And we didn't do that. We did the complete opposite. But what I want to ask you is this. Our team has battled a lot of adversity as far as being an undefeated team right now compared to other programs, right? Do you think that is going to help us moving forward, even though it hasn't really helped us from a ranking media aspect as far as maybe being highly more ranked than what we are at 6? But do you feel like that the adversity that we have gone through and battled through the last few weeks, do you think looking at the rest of our schedule and not really having much offense there remaining on the opposing side of the football for these teams that we're going up against, do you think the adversity that we've gone through, it's really going to help us on this back end of the season to where now we're going to be able to get back to those huge leads and gaps where we're starting to blow out teams like we were at the beginning of the season, and that could really help us as far as ranking and just from a media aspect?
Possibility that this will be a very good forged team. Let me go back a little bit, and this is the comparison that I made before the year. Can Cam Ward be our Joe Burrow? And I remember this. Miami fans forget we were at Joe Burrow's first game as an LSU Tigers at AT&T Stadium. I was there for that game. I remember watching Joe Burrow, and I said to myself, he's not bad. He's a pretty good game manager. I had no idea a year later he put up the greatest season a quarterback's ever had. Okay, so this is how things can change. But if you look at that 2019 LSU team, which had about, 17 guys drafted, look at their first 7 to 8 games, Brad. They were not good on defense. And they had guys like Patrick Queen. They had Delpit. I mean, they had NFL guys at all 3 levels. And they gave up like 600 yards to Lyles Plumlee, who ended up going to UCF. And I'm thinking to myself, they're going to waste Burrow. I remember watching some of these games where they would score 60 and they'd give up 40. But guess what? The last third of the year, it wasn't Glenn Dorsey level defense or the Honey Badger, but they got better. That's what Miami has to do. They have to get better. The only real trap game I see after Florida State, that trip to the Dome to face Fran Brown's guys and Kyle McCord who could chuck it a little bit, that's a pretty good test. But yes, I think Miami can be better because it's the healthiest that we have been since the first 5 plays of Florida. And Ruben Bain is starting to round into form like the All-American we think he is. And he has the ability to elevate everybody on that front 4. But that secondary, the coaches are going to have to earn some money here and really shuffle things around, because it would be a shame to waste this. Because, Brad, I know this as a much older guy than you. I remember when Ken Dorsey took over in 2000. Kenny Kelly decided to play baseball, wasn't going to go to spring ball, and Butch Davis said, Kenny, you're a quarterback. So Dorsey leads us to the doorstep of a national title. And I remember thinking, oh, this is great, because he was a sophomore. So we said, we get 2 more years of this. Like, we're good. With Cam Ward, we're halfway through the regular season, guys. So it's not like he has another year of eligibility. We cannot squander this, because there's a harsh reality facing us that come 4 or 5 months from now, we might be shopping for a new quarterback. But we got a special one now, so don't waste this guy.
Absolutely. And you brought up our guy, Cam Ward. And before we get to this next question, this is a perfect time to talk about this nice jersey I'm wearing right here, the number 1 Cam Ward jersey. Our guy Brett and the team over at CanesWear, who do an excellent job anytime you walk into that shop, or if you're going online with the fast shipping and service that they provide. They also got all your Cam Ward jerseys, white, green, black, orange. If you want it in a baseball jersey, basketball jersey, or if you got wife and kids who want to get the Cam Selly on Saturday as well wearing the jersey, they got all the Cam Ward jerseys, every color you need, only on CanesWear.com, along with all your other Miami Hurricanes fan apparel, Inter Miami, Miami Marlins, Florida Panthers, Miami Dolphins as well. So please make sure you go to CanesWear.com for all your Miami apparel needs. Now, getting back to Cam Ward, Steve, you've watched some of the greats, whether it was in person, covering, and just throughout the years. You've been to some of the best football games ever in Miami Hurricane history. Going to now, 2024 with Cam Ward at quarterback. The first question I want to ask you is this. Is Cam Ward the greatest Miami Hurricane quarterback you've ever seen?
Wow. I would love for you to ask me on January 21st after we hoist the title and I say, yeah, I'll say it. It's hard because he's going to have a Miami career that'll be less than 20 games. My personal favorite and the one that really got me to be a Miami fan was Steve Walsh. Steve Walsh was 23-1. And if it wasn't for a horrendous call on the Cleveland Gary non-fumble at South Bend, he's 24-0. And he's leading us to back-to-back national titles against two really good schedules. And Steve Walsh had a command of the game, and he was incredibly cerebral under the Gary Stevens offense. I've always thought he was the best chess master we had alongside Bernie Kosar. The best physical specimen is obviously Vinny Testaverde. Problem was, in the bowl games, his favorite receivers were not Miami Hurricanes. Ken Dorsey, maybe the greatest, most consistent winner, but you know what? He can't do as many things athletically as Cam Ward. He really can't. Craig Erickson was a really good athlete with the whip-like release. I don't think he's as creative as Cam. Cam's ability to extend plays consistently and have the moxie that he does have, if you put that into perspective of throw out the longevity, forget the fact he's only a one-year Hurricane, I'll leave it like this because I know there's a lot of meat on the bone left on this season. I'm going to leave myself an out. Right now, he's carving his face on the Mount Rushmore. He's carving his face on there with a lot of room to grow.
With the Miami Hurricanes Bose headphones on him as well, man. I mean, I saw that today. I'm so jealous, man. I need some Bose headphones, Cam.
And doing the selling, and you know what? Hold on. And I can't leave out the most important player in program history because without him, there is no you, Jim Kelly. Jim Kelly started it all. Without him, there's no QBU. There's no early upsets leading into the 83 season. He was the guy that started everything. And greatest arm talent, I think, to this day, his ability to make any throw at any time. The guy went to 4 Super Bowls. He's a Hall of Famer for a reason. So obviously, shout out to Jim Kelly.
And, now that we're touching on all the great quarterbacks that's gone through this program, and we're obviously mentioning and talking about Cam Ward, the next question I want to ask you, I think the easy answer is Cam Ward. So I want to kind of throw that answer out the window. But when you really look at this team, right, there's a lot of scenarios and a lot of things you can say that play a part into just the great season that Miami's had so far. And just the way we battled through adversity and some of the things that we didn't see happening in years prior, that just seems like everything's coming together this year. And it's a lot different than the year when we have Malik Rozier at quarterback, where it doesn't feel like a lot of these things is luck and we're just waiting for the luck to run out, right? Yeah. But in your opinion, Steve, what has been the one or two things that you've seen that has really changed the way this Miami Hurricane football program is playing this year compared to years past?
Brad, it's easy. The evolution of Mario Cristobal, I'll go back to it. He's not trying to win games 24-20 and say, God, we held the ball for 38 minutes and we rushed it 84 times for 300 yards. No, he's actually gotten his Mike Leach on. Look at the way we're playing. We are a wide open team that's using tempo. We're spread. We're going empty backfield. And I think he realized one thing himself. I cannot be perceived as a quarterback killer or a coach that is not offensively friendly for two reasons. Number one, I got Cam Ward. If I got a gun, I got to shoot him. And number two, I have to make sure the next Jeremiah Smith, who comes from Dade County to Miami Hurricane, I want to play in that. I really believe the style of play in the past has hurt Miami in recruiting. You know a lot of these kids, they want their numbers. They want to play in a system that's going to showcase them. A lot of this is about optics and momentum. But the fact that Mario now realizes, you know what? Scoring 50 points a game is kind of nice. It makes it easier and it can bail me out. To me, that has been the biggest thing, is that Mario has gotten out of his own shell and said, you know what? Shannon Dawson, run your offense. Do what you do. Let's get to half 100.
And it's pretty scary that, to your point earlier, like you mentioned, there's still a lot of meat left on the bone, whether it's Cam Ward, whether it's the running backs, or just the offense as a whole. I think we all know Shannon Dawson hasn't thrown out all the bullets out of the gun yet, right? No. There's still a lot of things that nobody has seen yet, and that's a scary thing for opposing teams because there's a lot to game plan for. And there's just some things that you can watch all the film you want, but when the play happens and when the opportunity is there, there's just some things that Cam Ward and Xavier Restrepo and others that you're just not going to be able to stop or game plan for, right? And that just goes to show you the Jimmies of the Joes. And you brought up some great points of Mario not feeling like the old school mentality of the ground and pound and just wanting to out physical you, right? Because he does talk about that, all right. Yeah. But I think the physical starts in the trenches, and we all see that. And that's really what's helped and gravitated this team to a new level where we're starting to really look like an SEC caliber football team. Not only when we get off the bus, not only when we're warming up, but now you're seeing it each and every drive. And when it matters the most in that fourth quarter is really when I feel like Miami really furthers the gap from their opponents so far this year as well. And of course, game managing, right? Game managing some of the foes that have knocked Mario in past. It seems like he's really doing a better job at that as well. So just learning from, past mistakes, I think has really helped Mario and this staff. Last question before we get you out of here. Obviously you brought up Florida State and a possible Syracuse as the two last toughest matchups for Miami.
Well, Georgia
and I wanted to bring up Florida State.
Don't forget
if they have
Tech,
Haynes King.
Haynes King. Right. That's the caveat. Yep. You got to have Haynes King.
True. But I wanted to bring up Florida State, not only because obviously we play them this weekend and it's a rivalry, but you saying that this is still a tough game is interesting to me. And you have a good point because it is a rivalry. But when you really look at this program of Florida State, I mean, you watch them each and every week, which is very hard to do so. You might as well have a blindfold on and just listen to things because watching them is very hard to do. But this is a team that doesn't have very much value, right? This is your great value brand. Like this isn't the Louis Vuitton and the Gucci and the Prada that you're seeing in Miami. You're getting the great value Kmart brand over at Florida State right now. And they're bottom feeders. I mean, they're juggling two different quarterbacks that have maybe thrown 15 or 17 passes this year. You got an offensive line group that's atrocious. Their number one receiver that they're probably relying on is a young guy in Hakeem Williams that was obviously from Stranahan that Miami and Florida State were battling with. And then when you look on the defensive side of the ball, they just lost to a Duke team that had a quarterback that threw 80 yards or less. Yeah. And this is a Cam Ward that is going to throw 80 yards on the first drive probably. So I want to ask you this. Why do you think this will still a tough matchup for Florida State? Well, it's obvious it's a rivalry. But when you really do look at the Jimmies and Joes and you look at the stats, I'm going to be honest, this should be a blowout. And I think the 21-point spread is given a favor, if anything.
Brad, I'm with you. I'm just saying that if we don't blow them out early and you give them this courage and this confidence, it can get more difficult than you think. I'm expecting the Miami to handle this team and run away late. If we get on top of them 17-0 in the first quarter and a half, they're going to quit. That's just what they're going to do.
That's what I want.
Yeah, because quite frankly, we owe them for 97 when they blew us out, I think 47-0. We owe them for 2 years ago when they embarrassed us at home 45-3. Mario wants a blowout. There's no doubt about it. They're going to bring in a lot of recruits. It'll be close to a sellout. Here's the issue. Their front four is still pretty good. Do they have some front runners? Yeah, but last week I thought they actually played fairly well. They held Duke to 180 yards. That Duke offense is not very good, and they were very, very conservative. But if Brock Glenn doesn't turn the ball over in 3 straight plays, they probably still or might win that game. Their cornerbacks aren't bad. The Florida State cornerbacks, I don't know if they're quite as good as the guys we faced at Cal, Noel Williams and Marcus Harris. Virginia Tech had a good set of cornerbacks, so they're probably in that area. But again, Miami's goal, if it is to blow them out, and I think we will cover the spread, I actually want to see like a 68-0. Because I've never actually seen it. Every Florida State Miami game I've gone to has come down to a field goal or Sean Taylor doing Superman in 2003. It's the only lopsided Florida State Miami game I've ever been to, really. So I really think it goes like this. A team like Florida State that has nothing to play for, this is their bowl game, Brad. And you could either get them disinterested in playing the game by the second quarter, or you can get them to be more interested. Now, with that said, Miami should win this game. It's at home. Every metric favors us. We have the better quarterback. Look, I'm not saying it's a tough game. What I'm saying is we are due for a clean game, and let's not make it into a tougher game than it needs to be.
And it's interesting you brought up, this is their bowl game for Florida State, because it seems like this has been the common theme ever since going back to the South Florida game, where every opponent we gone to, this is their Super Bowl, right? And even though it is a rivalry, you're looking at a 1-6 Florida State team, to where if they lose this game against Miami, they're now 1-7, and they have to win every single game the rest of the year just to be bowl eligible. So you talk about this being their bowl game. This literally could there be their bowl opportunity, right? So it's a good point, but I do want to say this. Go ahead, Steve.
Charleston Southern's the only game they're going to be favored in the rest of the way. And by the way, their other rival, Florida's actually getting better. I don't see them beating Florida.
Yep. I agree, especially with DJ Lagway. And I'll say this, before we get you out of here, I want to ask you your predicament on the defensive side of the ball, because I think we could all agree the offense has not been an issue, number one in the country, and Cam Ward's going to continue to be Cam Ward. But when you look at the defense side of the football, we talked about it throughout the show, that's been the glaring weakness, especially in the secondary. But I do want to say this, in big opportunities, 3rd and long, even on 1st and 2nd downs, and in key opportunities, you see at times we do disguise and run a couple blitz scenarios on the defense side of the ball. But to my point earlier, the last few teams we've had, whether it's the quarterback or the playmakers on the offensive side of the ball, they've been able to utilize and capitalize on those opportunities, because unfortunately our guys just aren't getting to the quarterback in time, even on a 4-man rush. But I will say this, looking at this Florida State offense with 2 backup quarterbacks that they're going to probably be alternating, figuring out who's going to be that guy throughout the game, this is a huge opportunity to where if I'm Lance Guidry, I'm bringing the house almost every single time, because I don't have faith in this quarterback. I don't have faith in the offensive weapons of Florida State of really creating those big plays, because they haven't been used to doing that all year. And some of these other opponents that you faced in the prior weeks, those are the teams that have shown big plays and have capitalized even when you are ready and tested for them. And this being a rivalry game in Florida State, you got to be ready for everything. So I expect Lance Guidry to really kind of restamp himself of really getting the fan base back on board of this guy being one of the best defensive coordinators in college football.
Yeah, and look, if we can get ahead and make them one-handed, that takes Toafili out of the game, Cam Davis out of the game, who's a pretty good big back. And what I saw out of Brock Glenn, look, he's nominally probably a little more functional than DJ. Croman Hawk actually showed a little bit of promise, but, I don't want to say he's overly athletic. He probably has very average mobility for this level of football. But so much of this about college football is emotion. And if they get behind, I'm just telling you, by 2 or 3 scores within the first quarter, this is going to look a lot like the 2020 game, the COVID year, where we ran them out of the park 52-10. And I kept thinking, boy, they're not going to beat us for a decade. I mean, really, I really felt that way. Like, wow, Manny Diaz may actually have this thing turned around. We were a top 10 team for about 2 weeks, and then Clemson shot us back down to reality. But I want to say one thing. You mentioned a name that I think that we have appreciated. I know me and you have. When he leaves, I'm going to pour some out. Xavier Restrepo. It is time to put full respect on his name. When he leaves, he should be mentioned as an all-time great. I don't want to hear that he's just a gamer or a grinder or an overachiever. No, I don't even want to hear that, wow, he's a great slot receiver, which he is. Best we've ever had in program history. All due respect to Wesley Carroll and Kevin Williams and Braxton. The greatest slot receiver. But he should be listed among the Michael Irvins, Eddie Browns, Andre Johnson, Reggie Waynes, Lamar Thomases, Santana Moss. He's a top 10 all-time University of Miami receiver. Bottom line. It's that simple.
I'll go a step further, Steve. Not only should he have a banner raised in the IPF like some of the greats, but when you follow X's background, his storyline from the beginning, ever since Pop Warner intramurals football, this is a young man where all he wanted, that one dream he always wanted as a kid, was to put on that U helmet, right? And we talk about year after year, well, whether they're making plays on the field or if we just wanted the mentality and love they have for the U and put it in someone that has the talent but isn't necessarily checked in all the time, right? X checks off every box you want as not only a human being, but as a Miami Hurricane student football athlete. And what he's not only done for this football program, but what he's going to continue to do for the city of Miami, whether it's teaching the younger kids like his younger brother and his dad do excellent, great stuff on their 7-on-7 and their Pop Warner team as well in the local area. But that young man, Xavier Restrepo, when it's all said and done, we need either a statue or a park named after him because he's going to continue to give back. He's going to continue to give back to this city, like a Reuben Bain, like a Dwayne Wade, and Alonzo Mourning, right? Alonzo Mourning, in my opinion, would be a perfect comparison to how I think Xavier Restrepo is going to mean to this city, not only to the University of Miami. This is a guy that years and years down the road, you will hear his name be an influential impact, the same way he does on the football field. He'll do that off the football field.
Brad, I really believe this, and I wrote this a couple of weeks ago in my game wrap-up before I left for the Oakland airport on Twitter. I said, look, I really believe this. When Mario Cristobal has staff meetings about recruits and is he a take, who do we drop? I would ask every staff member, if I'm Mario, all right, is he like X? Does he have that DNA like a Restrepo? If not, we're good. But if he does, I'll take a chance on it. I think that should be one of the prerequisites. How much of an X DNA does he have? In that Cal game, I was there. I mean, first of all, Miami, when they're good, brings out the crowds. I guarantee you Cal has not had that type of crowd in years. I mean, there was an energy and electricity at Memorial Stadium that even their fans said, we haven't had a crowd like this in years, even for the Stanford game. And that is their big rivalry, the big game. But some of those fourth downs, there was literally at least 2 times where I said, if we don't make it, I think we might leave. Everyone, I'm just telling you, even my friend who drove us there said, Steve, there's 6 or 7 plays that if we don't convert, I was going to tell you, look, you can find an Uber or you could ride with me. I'm out of here. And he made a couple of tough grabs in traffic on fourth down where I'm like, there's nobody else I want that ball thrown to but 7. And then, Brad, I'll set the stage. We get the ball with about 1:40. And we have, I think we have 1 or 2 timeouts. We're at the 8-yard line. And I'm thinking, okay, we can do this. Just got to keep, throwing above the chains. We could stop the clock, but we got to be in quick tempo. And I'm on the opposite end zone. They're coming towards us. Brad, it's like a movie. I could see it in slow motion. Ward goes back and he lofts it. And I could see X running that kind of that deep middle cross. And all of a sudden, you could just see it. And he catches the ball. And I noticed, like, there's nobody there. And as he turns
around
it up,
him,
it was almost like surreal, Brad, how I could literally just see him walking in slow motion with music. And when he got tackled, I could hear the crowd. It was the most surreal play of the year for me.
It was even more surreal that he was that wide open. You talk about just the crunch opportunities, and when we need that big play or first down, it's always X that seems to come up. And it's like, if you're a defensive coach, if you've been game planning for this team all week, how do you not double, triple team X and say someone else on this team is going to beat us, but it's not X, right? And it's just, sure enough, man, he always finds a way to make miracles happen.
What about the butt catch? We're not even talking about the butt catch against Virginia Tech, because that was coming towards our end zone. And I said, this guy's magic. And I'm sick and tired of people saying, well, he'll only be a mid-round choice. You know what, folks? I don't care if he's Mr. Irrelevant. When he leaves, when you open up that media guide, which they no longer print, you look it up on the computer, you're going to see that name, Xavier Restrepo, all over that record book in terms of every single receiving statistic that matters. I don't care if he doesn't catch one ball at the next level, which he will, by the way, because he's versatile and tough. He's an all-time great that we need to appreciate now.
Before I get you out of here, I saw this interesting thing about X, about, going to the next level at the NFL. Would you put it out of contention of X possibly transitioning to maybe a running back type of role in the NFL? Do you think that is something that could be up X's alley, or do you think he has to be more of a special team situational slot wide receiver at the next level?
Well, the fact he can play special teams, and he's a very sure-handed guy. People always talk about punt returning as having to be Devin Hester. The first thing they want is ball security. Okay, and there's a reason why at times he replaces Ray. But I think, look, positionless football is becoming more and more of a thing, like the Deebo Samuels or a Cordell Patterson. If you show some versatility, the one thing I've always liked about X, when he gets that ball, he turns into a wide receiver. He's low to the ground. He's built well downstairs. He can break tackles. I remember against Texas A&M last year, right before half, he shrugged off a tackle, got 15 more yards. And his football IQ is off the charts. If you watch that play again, Brad, against Louisville last week, when we retook the lead off that long shot from Cam, this is a lesson for all young players. When he's heading towards the goal line, he's stumbling, the way he protects that ball. I mean, that's textbook. That is a guy that has a 500 football IQ. There will always be room on a squad for a guy that is as tough and as versatile, as intelligent out from X. X, I'm just telling you, I'm his biggest fan. He to me is getting legendary status.
I'm right there with you, man. Heart of a lion, man, and that dude will do anything for the U, man. You gotta love the passion, blood, sweat, and tears he continues to pour in this program, and you'll be at the Hard Rock Stadium this weekend against Miami, Florida State, the big rivalry that will be going on this Saturday on ESPN, 7:00 Eastern. And hey, we need you along with the rest of the fans to pack the rock. Before I get you out of here, Steve, what is your score prediction? What's your score prediction?
I'm not going to be scared. We're going to put up half 100, and we'll give up more than 14. So I'll say 55-13. The good guys.
55-13. I'm pretty close to that. I think I was like 62-13 or 62-10.
I'll take
around there. So we're around the same numbers. But man, if we could put up at least a 50 burger on Florida State and redeem ourselves from that 45-3 in 2022, I'm gonna love it, man. Gonna love it. Well, hey, Steve, I appreciate you as always, man. Anytime we get together, it's nothing but great Miami talk, man. I always love talking it with you, man. And I hope these Cane fans and all of our viewers and listeners make sure that you follow Steve. Steve, go ahead and plug all your info so they know where to find your amazing work.
Yeah, on X or Twitter, it's Steve Kim 323, and then on Instagram, as I show my East LA roots, it's Steve Orale Kim. So it's Steve ORALEKIM. That's where you can find me on social media. I do the 3 knockdown rule with Mario Lopez. Also on Coach JB and Smitty's show twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I'm on with Jason Whitlock daily on Fearless.
I forgot to ask you this before I get you out. Coach JB, he is an interesting character, very funny guy. We definitely got to get him on the show one day.
Yeah.
But he's got a lot of interesting takes as far as coaches, strategies, and even big-time players, whether it's NFL or college football in today's age. And a lot of them he's pretty accurate with. And he's just one of the few guys that just tell you how it is and doesn't sugarcoat anything. You being around him each and every week and watching Miami Hurricanes football, obviously, and Cam Ward, him not sugarcoating it, behind the scenes, what is his real evaluation on Cam Ward so far this year?
He likes Cam. He thinks he's a really good college quarterback. And this is something that was echoed by Sean King. Where Cam Ward has to work on consistently is to be better at his mechanics more often. Okay? If you watch Cam Ward's first drive or two, he missed a couple of layups. And Sean King was sitting right next to me at the poker table. Steve, mechanics. That's the one. And Sean's a former quarterback who's coaching. And Steve, right there, that breakdown is something that a coach is going to have to take in the offseason. Cam, you're really good, but you weren't good there. I was watching the Florida game with JB. And do you remember that RPO that we ran to X that we missed going into the bushes where the recruits were? Immediately, Coach JB goes, Steve, that's what I mean about Cam. He's got to watch that arm angle. That throw had to be over the top. He can't wing it, and you see where the throw went. One thing that those two guys have stressed to me is they like Cam Ward. They think he's got a future, but they're going to have to work on his mechanics being a little bit more consistent in terms of launch angle and arm angle. And there's another guy who I really like on Twitter. His name is QB Unfiltered. He's a former JC coach, very knowledgeable. His name is Keith Simons. He made videos 9 months ago that said Cam Ward's the best quarterback in college football, and he's a Miami fan. He did a video yesterday where he talked about where Cam Ward needs to be better at more consistently is balance and weight shift on his throws and not always fading back when he doesn't have to. But again, these guys are fans, but they are coaches, so they will keep it 100, as the kids say.
I love it, man. And you always keep it 100 on the Miami Hurricanes platforms, man, whether it's your own or others, man. You do great, amazing work. As always, Cane fans, make sure you like and subscribe this. I'm your host, Brad Tejeda. We had our guy, Steve Kim, with us. This is the CanesWear Daily Podcast, only on FTSN. Steve, We'll see you on the next go around, man. Let's get this big dub against Florida State and continue the great success of this Miami Hurricanes program.
Thanks a lot, Brad. Anytime.